and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I am OmnusI. Perhaps change my look up a little bit, but still every bit as much happy to be here with you for another month of RPGaDay, the month of August where we celebrate gaming in all of its goodness, and we talk about things to uplift the community, as first conceptualized by Autocratic, and continued on for now 7 years. This is now the 4th year that I have done the RPGaDay, and I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. If you saw from the graphic in the beginning, we have another schedule of topics that we're going to be covering. Again, this year, the schedule is one-word topics throughout the course of the month that we will hammer out to fit a general positive outlook. If you yourself are interested in posting for the RPGaDay, just make sure that you hashtag it RPGaDay2020. And it could be anything, really. I'm going to try my hand at a few things possibly this year, but I'm going to try to wring something even more positive out of it. I've decided that this year what I'm going to do is go through question by question, theme by theme, and try to finally make something of my role-playing game, DicePhile, that I've been talking about now for the last 6 years, because that's how long I've been working on it. DicePhile is kind of a dream of mine, a game that fits the kind of world and styles that I can conceptualize in a way that most other systems just can't. I want a system that can do a little bit of everything, and in truth has the flexibility to do literally anything without a great deal of planning and forethought and concern. So, to do that, over the next month, I'm going to take these topics and apply them to my game. You will see it unfold before your eyes, and hopefully by the time I'm done, if I'm not finished, we'll be much closer to that. So, this particular bundle that I showed you has a couple of binders and notebooks that I have been jotting down random notes for, as I said, the last 6 years. It also is full of sheets of paper, notes, character mock-ups, some playtest characters, and a number of basically printed out copies of the work that I've done on my computer, trying to, put some concrete things down so that I can hand things out to people and let them look at my work so far. Right now, the basic set for DicePhile Fantasy, I have already gotten cobbled together enough so that a person could play it with what we have here. But today's topic word is, as we have on our handy little list, it is beginning. And obviously one of the most important things about a project that you care about and love is beginning it. It's one thing to think about it, and many people never get past that point. It's another thing to start putting pen to paper. And in truth, I'm not even 100% certain where I put the very first writings that I did for DicePhile down. It was on some piece of paper, and it might be in the stack somewhere. But really, it was an idea that was just kind of running through my mind, and over the course of this time, I keep having ideas and throwing it down and working on it some more and putting it down because something else catches my attention. But the very first concepts I had for this game, I'll be honest, it was, as a lot of great ideas, I was taking a shower. And while in the shower, I was thinking about dice, as I sometimes do, and thinking, I really like the 12-sided die, but it's a pity it doesn't get used more often. Obviously, primarily centric to Dungeons & Dragons, but let's face it, that's what a lot of people play. Or even games like DicePhile. The 12-sided die isn't used all that often. And I thought, it's a pity that more people don't actually seek to use a die like that. It's got a greater overall value. The average of a 12-sided die is higher than other dice. But games like Dungeons & Dragons make it hard to use a 12-sided die because, well, many of the things that use 12-sided dice have some drawbacks. For example, the barbarian can't do magic, so instead they're rewarded with the highest hit dice. A great axe can't be used with a shield. In some games it's slow and cumbersome, so it is rewarded with a 12-sided die potential for damage. And for the most part, that's fine. But I thought that most people have reasons for not, seeking the 12-sided die because there are numerous mitigating factors, and the lower die values often have better advantages. Back in 3rd edition, the advantage of not using the 12-sided die is oftentimes you would have a bigger crit range or something like that, so that more people use long swords and often shields to protect themselves in a fight to the death. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was a dice system that kind of made going for higher values something that you really sought after and drove towards, and the experience was to get higher and higher dice values. Now, if you're hearing this and you start thinking to yourself, well, there are game systems that do that. Well, at the time, I really wasn't experienced with any of those. I knew of Earth Dawn, which has kind of an odd dice scaling system. And while I had heard of some games, I really wasn't familiar with the mechanics. So if you say, well, that sounds a lot like Savage Worlds, I hadn't read Savage Worlds by then. So most of the stuff was just, I kind of jotted down some notes after taking my shower, and the very first parts of DicePhile were kind of sketched out in that way. So I did a number of things, like, went onto my MS Paint, and I created my first character sheet for it. It's a very, very simple system. And the character sheet, essentially, it gives you a playmat surface to put your dice on so that you have a visual representation of the dice that you have access to, which helps to sort out what you've already done in a given scene and how much more potential action you have. Which is a key feature of the game. One person can't keep doing things and doing things and doing things and doing things and doing things. You need to let everybody else have a chance, and then your dice refresh and you can do things again. And also, a person who rushes to do everything hastily may be caught without any resources and overextended while somebody has just been sitting and waiting for their opportunity. So there's an opportunity to use this dice mechanic tactically. Which I thought was pretty darn clever. And to date, I still haven't seen a system that uses dice pools in exactly that way. So I will still hold out that it is a unique and rather clever system, I think. But that is ultimately the beginning. Conceptualizing the idea, and then I started to jot down notes. Now, with these notes, I came up with a number of concepts. First of all, that I wanted a system that was kind of wide open. For instance, if you had a system where somebody who was pretty poor at something would use a 4-sided die, and somebody who was quite good at something might use an 8-sided die, and somebody who was an absolute master, best of the best, would use a 12-sided die, that gave you a decent amount of stepping stone range to determine if what your potential is for anything that you do. So I immediately came up with a quick list of 10 different abilities and 10 different skills that people could come up with. And then I kind of pared them down and got rid of redundancy and grouped things together, because in this time period I was really kind of getting used to the idea that having a lot of diversity can be good for some people, but some people really like simplicity and ease of play and quick motion. So I decided to have my cake and eat it too, because that's the kind of guy I am. Look at me, I've obviously eaten plenty of cake. But the idea was that depending on how you wanted to play the game, once you had DicePhile in your hands, you could feel free to apply lenses. to the game. And basically what lenses do is they allow you to focus the game with either laser precision or by fanning back, get a more general view, which would suffice for certain games. If you wanted to take it at its absolute most wide out lens, basically your skills come down to fighting, fighting, knowing, moving, and perceiving, I think, were the basic stuff. Fighting because you do a lot of fighting. And if you don't want to care about what skills you know, your weapon skills or anything like that, all you need is a die to show how well you can fight, you're fine. Knowing stuff lets you know what your character knows in world, and that clues you, the player, in because your character is smart. So that's a thing. Moving is basically everything that would cover some athletic endeavor or travel that might be left up to a die roll. So moving across treacherous ground or across a deck of a ship that is being buffeted by waves, climbing up something, swimming, that's all covered in one thing. Because generally somebody who's good at one thing is often going to be good at all of them, so I had no problems bunching them together. And perceiving is probably the best overall word for using your senses to detect something. Detect often doesn't sound like you're perceiving. It seems more like you are using some method, like a magic or something, to find something. So I didn't like that as much. And perceiving is often related to sight, but not always. It just means that you have witnessed or you have gotten some sort of sense feedback. Now, if you narrow your focus and broaden some of those things up, what I eventually came up with for the default level of abilities were brains, not just zombie food, your character's ability to learn, reason, and recall information. Deftness, your character's coordination, reflexes, precision, and overall nimbleness. I wanted to stay away from strength, intelligence, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, and charisma as much as I could. As many people have. Lots of games go out of their way to not be Dungeons and Dragons. Fortitude, your character's health and ability to resist ailments, natural and otherwise. Luck, your character's relative worth in the cosmos' plan, or how fortunate you can be. Basically kind of a catch-all, essentially. Muscle, your character's strength and physical prowess in applying force. Perception, your character's ability to notice important details in their surroundings. Presence, your character's force of personality and social adeptness. And will, your character's determination and resistance to mind control or manipulation. To my mind, those are the essential parts of a character that, when things come up, they would be tested time and time again, and covers the vast majority of a character's experiences from just their native attributes. Granted, you can develop any one of those things. You can work really hard at paying attention to things and eventually becoming a habit of it. You can train your muscles, clearly. You can exercise your brain. But at the same time, everybody can do those to a certain amount unless they have some sort of handicap. So, those are the most basic of abilities. They're harder to improve, but they're used often. Almost anything that you do, those have some impact. And the die value that they're given can be used as a die roll for anything involving that particular ability. Now, oftentimes abilities will be coupled with the element of skill, having developed some sort of specialized knowledge on ways of doing things. And so I came up with a variety of skills which are cheaper to increase but are more specialized, and are generally paired up with the different skills, or different abilities. So you have athletics, that's your ability to jump, climb, etc. Burglary, the skill of picking pockets and estimating value. Again, jumbling together a few things. Empathy, that's understanding another person. That also helps you to detect lies. Evasion, this is used to dodge attacks and harmful events. This is something that comes up often enough, but it's used in place of a saving throw. Grit, that's just raw determination and your ability to overcome unpleasantness, often used with fortitude. The reason why it is a skill is because your personal health is one thing, but if you continually expose yourself to punishment, I think like military training will often do, they will try to deliver an extra element of resisting damage. And to me, that is its own developed skill. People without it often don't have the levels of pain tolerance that a person who has repeatedly exposed themselves deliberately, oftentimes, to unpleasantness develop. Influence. This is again something that often has to do with a person's level of presence, but sometimes not always. Sometimes you can use, say, your raw muscle to influence somebody through intimidation. It opens it up to the possibility of using other skills and abilities for that. Lore. This often works along with your brains in terms of knowing things about the world around you. Stealth. And, well, it's self-explanatory. And traps and trickery, which could be bundled under burglary, but I kind of wanted to have a little bit of a separate skill there. Weapons skill, one-handed weapons. I know different one-handed weapons are used differently, but oftentimes they're intentionally done in such a way so that you can do something with the other hand. Wield a shield, grab somebody, or use an off-handed weapon. So if you are skilled with a one-handed weapon, you are kind of leaving yourself available to use the other hand, and it would cover a wide range of different weapons. Intentionally vague to give players an opportunity to develop as they wished. Two-handed weapons, missile weapons, and unarmed combat. That covers anything from brawling to martial arts. And shield defense. I have used a shield. I've LARPed, and I've had the experience. It's not just you hold it out and it gives you a static +2 to your armor class. You actually move it around. It is something that you develop reflexes to, keeping yourself intact. So I thought it would be fitting to be an appropriate skill. And a friend of mine who is absolutely fanatical about shields, Douglas Cole, tends to agree with that. So I thought it was appropriate. Now those are all intentionally genre-neutral skills. Those could work in any game system. So oftentimes you're going to have specialized skills that are going to be set for particular genres. For instance, if you want to have a game set in Warhammer 40,000, not that I'm telling you to, but you could, you would have some different skills, like for example bolter weapons, the little auto-fire rocket launcher weapons that are, so much a part of that universe. Your one-handed weapons would probably include like chain swords and other fun weapons like that, power swords. You probably might want something with like flame weapons. Those are also quite popular. Energy weapons like plasma and lasers, things like that. It wouldn't be very difficult to change the filter either. So if you want more detail, like you want a skill for jumping, you want a skill for climbing, you want a skill for balance, then you just change the lens, and you narrow down again on any of those different skills or abilities that you want to. It's relatively easy to do, and when I'm finished with this, I'm going to have all of that included in the rules on how to get to the level of detail that you want. It's never going to be a simulation style game where you accurately reflect out details like exactly how far you can shoot a gun, or having an exhaustive list of hundreds of skills. I can't imagine myself ever really wanting to do that. But you could with this system. It's relatively straightforward. So that is basically an introduction to my game system as far as these skills and other mechanics. Also, for purposes of demonstrating how different elements could be included, I also came up with a magic system. And really, the magic system was nothing more than delineating different branches of magic as they would apply similarly to a skill. And then the game master would decide target numbers. The players would have dice values and would generally roll their dice value. So, for instance, you would have war magic, warding magic, healing magic, necromancy, elementalism, mental magic, spatial magic, illusion magic, and divination magic. And those all fit within the fantasy world of my creation that I was working on at the time. which was cued in with this for a series of short stories that I was working on called Young Wizard. And while that didn't go very far, I didn't get any further than the first story, Necromancer's Dirge, and I never had the heart to publish it. I think it's good, and I think the world is fun, but just kind of became my thing personally. I basically held this game system to the standard of being able to handle my system, which really wouldn't have worked in any other game system that I was familiar with. Not GURPS, which, despite how flexible it is quite good for a wide variety of things. Not Dungeons & Dragons, certainly. The system would not have worked. But my system, it would. Considering that different people may use different outlets for their magic. It's inherent. So, for instance, a war mage, when he's analytically standing back and throwing out bolts of concussive force, he might very well be drawing upon his intellect to cast an appropriate spell, draw from the magic around him, and be able to blast foes with precision using their skills as artillerists. However, if a powerful enemy gets in their face and they absolutely need to draw on some of the more powerful magic, they might actually tap into their muscle, their physical power, and couple that with a spell of destructive force that they weave around their fist and punch the thing. In which case, it amplifies the strength that they have, and the system can use that. Now, that's something Dungeons & Dragons is capable of really doing well. And if it all comes down to a death stroke, something very desperate, it might use their fortitude as the resistance, the fuel for that spell, and it almost always will cost at the very least fatigue, if not injury, for casting such a spell. So my system can handle that, which I'm pretty proud of. In practice, I think it works pretty well. Obviously, there's a lot of element of room for customization, as intended. I always wanted the system to work with other systems. And about 2 years into making the game, this has not been a concentrated, deliberative effort. It's very much a stop and start process. I actually made a proof of concept game. I call it the Traveling Hat Club. It's designed for children, but it can be played by anybody who can summon up 10 coins. As long as they have a heads and tails, you can play basically the 0.1 version of DicePhile using 10 coins to resolve anything in a game. It's very, very wide open. It's very easy to play. And it potentially has infinite playthrough and possibilities. You can do anything, and you could be any age to play it. It was designed with younger kids in mind because it doesn't have advanced math. As long as you can count up to 8 or 9, you should be fine. Rarely will you have to actually throw 10 coins. And for things that are very, very basic or things your character isn't very good at, you might not throw very many at all. And you're just looking for how many heads are in the total. After that, the rules are incredibly simple and fits on a single page of paper. So it works fairly well. If you have an interesting story and people who enjoy storytelling, as I found a lot of younger folks do before their imagination is quashed out by our education system, and that happens, unfortunately. Those who are still blessed with great creativity can really use this game as a storytelling device. And for my DicePhile game, it's a bit more advanced and has more nuance and ability to do different things and incorporate different elements depending on the game that you want to run. So that is the beginning of my game. That is the beginning of this month's series. And I'm really kind of looking forward to this. I really hope at the end of this, if you're interested in my game, if you're interested in my videos, by the time it's done, you'll have a guided walkthrough on a lot of different aspects, some of which I'm going to have to create to match these themes. Because I can already see a couple of them that are, well, I'm going to have to work to match them, and it may even include delving into elements that I've only loosely considered. As it is, the game is bare bones and functional. But ultimately, I would like to get this to a state where I can actually say, here, go to my Drive-Thru RPG page and download it if you'd like. That would be really cool. So we'll see if we can't get there together. If you are interested in watching a game develop before your very eyes, I'm giving you the opportunity in taking advantage of this RPG a day to possibly birth my game. And by the time we're done, you'll be able to play my game too, even if you don't buy it, just by knowing my methods, and at some point I'll put up my printable character sheet so that you can run your own games. So how cool is that, right? All right. Well, anyhow, I am OmnusI, also known as Rob. Thank you for joining me. This has been day 1 of RPGaDay2020, and thanks for joining me. Until next time, farewell.